Kevin O'Hara has a new book, and this one, they're all deeply personal. There's no doubt they're all deeply personal, but this one has a different vibe compared to some of the others. But Kevin, my God, it's great to see you.
Oh, nice to see you again, John.
When's the last time we saw it? Well, I don't know. I guess the last time we've seen each other was more recent, but the last time I had you on a broadcast program was a little while ago.
Yeah, 2004. Yep, when the donkey came out. Yeah,
the last of the Donkey Pilgrims,
right.
Which was amazing. That was your first real big book, right?
Right. That took me 25 years to write.
That's it.
on and off effort, of course. But yeah, it really did well, and it's still doing well. And it's into its 20th print run.
Wow.
And actually might get a boost with this other book because I cross-reference that quite often in the book, my psychiatric book or my Jones book.
It's interesting because from what I understand, this sort of anecdote in regard to the nursing philosophy and your approach to nursing, a little bit of donkeyism, if that's a way to describe it,
yeah, the donkey
slides into that a little bit.
Yeah, the donkey nurse. Well, it was a very strange thing. I had been a nurse for 4 or 5 years prior to my going to Ireland to walk the donkey around the coast. When I came back to the workplace, we were having a rash of restraints and seclusions. Mm. It was them versus us mentality, patients versus staff. And there was no need for it in many ways. We were too quick off the trigger, sort of, to kind of keep people down and controlled. But during my donkey travels, what I had learned was, see, my donkey had to be sheltered in a secure field every evening, or she might wander off against me. Maybe not. In the end, she wouldn't, but in the early going, she'd scamper, especially when she was in season and she was looking for a jack for company, not a jackass like myself, right? So I oftentimes, well, not that frequently, but now and again, she'd have to be sheltered with these high-wired racehorses. And boy, they'd be quick. And you'd worry about them, and they snip and nip. My donkey, Missy, was very humble and gentle beast, right? She didn't have much fight in her. And I thought she'd be bitten by these characters, you know? But the farmers would say, no, believe me, she's all right. She makes for a good pasture buddy, and she has a way of calming down the rest of her horses, or the rest of the horses. So sure enough, I go back 20, 30 minutes, and they'd all be cropping the grass peacefully together. So I said, gee whiz, how wonderful that is for her to have that. She's also a great guard of the herd. So, you know, she'd protect the herd, whether it be goats or sheep or horses 3 times her size. And when I came back to the floor with these restraints and seclusions, I asked Eileen Myers, my boss, I said, Eileen, could I become the donkey nurse? She wasn't quite where I was going. I just came back after walking the donk, right? And she asked what I mean. And I said, well, to be out there in milieu, and as a benevolent person, you know, humorous, not big on rules, more or less an ombudsman, you know, a nice go-between, you know, not harsh on rules or anything, but near enough to be one of each, one of them and one of ours, right? And it worked remarkably well. In fact, a couple of years later, we got a very big award from the Department of Mental Health. We were the least restrictive unit in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We went 1 full year with never needing to put our hands on a patient. Wow. Which is, you know, you just can't even figure that out, especially with the clientele we had, many of whom did not want to be there. You know, this was Jones 3. No, it wasn't, it was Jones 2. But when I did return after my walk around Ireland, there was great fanfare. You know, it was liked well enough, right? And there was a confused, addled old fella, you know, patient, but he didn't know where I was, who I was, and he got irritable. He said, what's all the fuss about? What's all this fuss all about? And I went over to him and I said, I'm just returning here to Jones 2 after walking a donkey around the entire coastline of Ireland, right? He looked at me with a tear in his eye and he said, don't worry, son. When I first came in here, I thought I was Teddy Roosevelt.
Love it.
Yeah, so he just said, "Oh, here's another Looney Tune, right? Here's another
It
one.
fit right in.
What
here.
room? What room are you in? You want to be my roommate?" Yeah, so for many, many years, I was able to do that. And Eileen was great, a great boss. You were talking earlier about the old mayor, Jim Roberto.
Sure.
He was fabulous. And so was it my Eileen. And no, we did really well together. And from that time on, things went very well. Then in 1988, Jones 3 opened, and it was a locked ward involuntarily. So basically, people who went there were often court ordered to go there. So that was a different kettle of fish, but we maintained what we had been doing on Jones 2. A number of us came up to 3, and yeah, it worked fairly well.
Yeah,
Believe me, we had a rough time, so we had some tough goes, but overall, it was much better. And I always thank Missy, my donkey, for just who she was. I mean, it's crazy for her to be my mentor in many ways, but you learn from a humble little beast, if you pay attention. And I tell you, I did pay attention because she was the only pal I had for 8 months,
So that
walking around.
us versus them mentality,
Yeah.
you were able to break through that. And I think, a lot of that is being able to see a person, and you were the one who would go in and you had your tie on, and they would say, "Well, that better be a clip-on tie," right?
Right.
Because it's actually a physical danger to you
Right.
to have an actual tie, and it was a real tie. But to some extent, that was probably, at least that energy was recognized by those patients to some extent, and you were really that person who saw them.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I was just kind of fun loving. And geez, where did you get your license? Walmart. These are the quips I used to get. What do you ever hear of a bearded nurse? I get all this slagging, but of course I didn't mind it. Plus,
you were the bearded nurse.
Yeah.
You were also Nurse-Lite. Where did Nurse-Lite come from?
Nurse-Lite comes from my dear friend Spencer Trova. Him and I worked together since 1974. We were the last two, and we retired together in 2010.
Wow.
Yeah. So we opened Jones 2 in 74, and we opened Jones 3 in 1988, and we both retired in 2010. He became a deacon.
No kidding.
Yeah, a deacon at St. Mark's for a while, and then St. Charles. And myself, I got to teach at Southern Vermont College nursing for a year or two, and then I hung up my cap, so to speak. Fortunately, men didn't wear caps. It was tough to be a male nurse back then when I first started.
That is interesting. I mean, to be the and obviously you weren't the only one. You had Mr. Trova with you, but looking at that, I suppose it's more accepted today, in the culture. But still, I mean, it is predominant women as nurses. So what is that like? Because usually you look at the dynamic and it's like, okay, there's the nurse and then there's the physician,
right.
And there's a certain approach to that, and the physician is like, oh, here comes the physician, he's in the hierarchy.
Well,
but
exactly.
But being the male nurse, especially in the 70s, what was that like?
Well, first of all, I just got to tell you one quick anecdote. So I'm dating my wife, Belita. All right. She was a medical technology student from the Philippine Islands. And there was a tennis court behind St. Luke's Hospital where I worked, and Belita worked. Both of us worked there. But we were dating at the time, and we both liked to play tennis. So we were playing tennis, and 2 kids from the neighborhood, a boy and a girl, brother and sister, they came to watch, and they had their rackets. So I said to them, listen, we're only going to be another 10 minutes. So just stick around and play right after us. They said, yeah. So the little girl said, are you studying to become a doctor? She yells across the pavement there. And brother kind of gives her a ribbing and says, what do you think he's studying to be? A nurse? But that was killing. I mean, that cut me in half, especially since Belita was a med tech, and she was having lunch with all these surgical residents, and this type of thing, with nice scrubs, and here I am with this ugly white frock, stained and everything, with all the mundane tasks I had to do. But how I became a nurse was during my stint in Vietnam in 69 and 70. I had read the book, The Night They Burned a Mountain by Dr. Tom Dooley. And it really inspired me to become a nurse, because Tom Dooley had a clinic in Laos and Cambodia, but in Laos, a place called Moon Sing. And he started a clinic there. And I wrote to the foundation, the Dooley Foundation. I said, what are you in need of? And he said, right, they wrote back immediately. They said, we're in desperate need for nurses. So there in Vietnam, Cam Ranh Bay, bingo. I said, that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to join the Dooley Foundation. I'm going to come back here and work for a year or two, or maybe longer, in Laos. But as I was going through BCC, taking the prerequisite courses, sure enough, the war spilled over to Cambodia and Laos, and therefore the clinics had to be abandoned. And Dr. Dooley died very young. He died at age 34. But he was the man who went to Notre Dame, Catholic. He was the one who basically inspired the Peace Corps. So with that in mind, that's when I really became, then I'm halfway through. I haven't started my training, but I have like 9 courses taken care of already. My mother was a nurse, a psychiatric nurse, and she took care of very famous people in England during World War II. In fact, she took care of a lady, Lady Violet Gibson, who actually in 1926 tried to assassinate Benito Mussolini.
No kidding.
And my mom was her nurse for a few years, along with other nurses, of course, but she was on the same ward. Huh. And she was a great woman. In fact, I have a story in the Eagle on Saturday.
Where was she? Where was this?
Well, after she shot Mussolini, nicked him in the nose with a gunshot, the second shot jammed. Otherwise, history would have been changed totally. But Mussolini said, he said it's a simple joke with a pistol shot. He saved her from an angry mob, but rather have her imprisoned. They sent her, this is before the war, now 1926, they sent her to St. Andrews, where she lived for the rest of her life until she died in 1966, I believe. But my mom took care of her. And those stories that my mom would tell, and also going to Wales to avoid the bombings in England and the Blitz that time, those stories always resonated with me. Her nursing tales and her stories. And my brother Dermot became a nurse. So all of a sudden, in our little house, we have 2 male nurses. I mean, what's the chances? As my brother Dermot used to always joke, geez, Kev, if we didn't become nurses, we'd end up being male nuns. That's a very scary thought. Male nurse is really bad. That's kind of oxymoronic anyways. And I wish they dropped the male in that. Eventually they'll just, a nurse is a nurse.
Yeah.
You don't say female nurse.
Of course.
But it's just one of those little things.
I guess the vestige would continue, because in healthcare, some people request male nurses or female nurses, and based on whoever they're caring for. But yeah, I mean, you don't need to say male nurse anymore. Come on, this is 2022, right?
Yeah, maybe I could change it. Maybe my book will do that. Yeah, but you're right. And there was probably 1% to 2% of nurses in general in 1970 were male or men. And many of them were from the Christian orders, Christian Brothers and all these other things, monastic monks basically had nurses. And then Walter Whitman was a nurse during the Civil War for 3 years. And that gave it a little more of a manly thrust, to the profession. Nothing wrong with being a hairdresser either, but you know what I mean? You get caught into a little box,
Sure. Sure.
So you didn't have to fight it, but you were kind of made fun of by my friends. Oh, what are you going to be, a nurse? Oh, really, O'Hara? That kind of thing. You get some slagging. Of course you did. But now I think it's up to about 9-10%.
Yeah.
And men have really done well, especially in the emergency room and the OR and the psychiatric wings, where some brawny presence sometimes is helpful.
Yeah.
That doesn't include me.
Right. Well, it was interesting because you were also known as Kevlar.
Yeah, Kevlar. Yeah.
And so tell me about that. But then at one moment, one incident, you ceased to become Kevlar.
Right.
when you were body slammed
Right.
and so forth. But first you were Kevlar before you weren't.
Yeah, I was Kevlar for a long time, and the reason was I could get away with things that others couldn't. I remember once I left a patient down in the courtyard. It was locked, but I left him down there, right? And Kathy Plakin, her name was, she did something, a real misdemeanor, and our boss questioned her. But meanwhile, he never really said much about me leaving a patient down below. I caught about 15 minutes. Hey, where's Fred? And then we went to get him. But Kathy was the one who said, that's your name. That's your new name, Kevlar. Now, Spencer Trova called me Nurse-Lite because I never had any formal training in intensive care units, coronary care units, the medical units. I mean, I basically went from St. Luke's as a general, what do you call them, graduate nurse, right to Jones 2. So I never really had much training, for doing things and like hanging IVs, giving shots. I got fairly good at that in the end. But, I wasn't a real medical nurse, whereas Spencer and a number of our colleagues had gone to other positions, and they were very valuable on our floor. We didn't have not often did we have any medical concerns, but oftentimes it would sprout out. And I was helpless in Mayday situations. In fact, I say in the book that I didn't know the difference between a ping pong paddle and a cardiac paddle, right? That's how sad I was. So Spencer used to always call me Nurse-Lite. Kathy Plakin called me Kevlar. Patients called me the bearded nurse. And I called myself the donkey nurse. So that will give you a sense of what I was like on a psych unit, no less, where it all fit in very nicely.
And especially, well, in a world, in an industry where it's always been nurses eat their young.
Right.
Now, I don't know if you had a special dispensation as, the man.
Right.
Maybe you didn't have quite the same experience, but
Right.
but that's a thing.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky. Some nurses weren't very kind to some men, but I think a lot of it had to do with the men themselves. You're right. They might have been a little boastful, but I had another little thing going for me. My father was working at St. Luke's Hospital for years. He drove the Sisters of Providence around in a big Fleetwood Cadillac.
Nice.
Right. We were like the third poorest family in our parish, and we drive around all summer long in this Fleetwood, We're always sort of out of touch. But my dad, right from Ireland, wonderful brogue, wonderful accent, a great chatter person, storyteller. And he would enamor himself to all the St. Luke's nursing students, of which there were maybe 50, 60 per class for years coming out of St. Luke's Hospital in their diploma program. And they all lived basically right there at Madonna Hall. And my dad knew every one of them. So when Kevin O'Hara came home from Vietnam and started nursing and then became an orderly, oh, you're James O'Hara's son. Welcome, that kind of thing. So I had a nice in, and then a few people would have known that my mom and my two aunts were nurses as well. So yeah, looking back, and Dermot was great, my brother, and good looking and fun and that great mop of brown hair. And, so they liked him a little more than the little Weasley guy you got on camera here, Weasley looking. So,
but hey, you were the lucky Irish lad.
That's right.
Right.
See, I was always lucky, and I got lucky there. I got lucky in my profession. I really nursed for well over actually 30 years. But I had several breaks. I'd break for a year, I'd break for 6 months, but that was very important. And I think nurses should be given sabbaticals just like teachers. I mean, you can get burnt out.
What I like about your book is, and I'm sure it's not the only book that does this, but obviously, but in a day and age when nursing is so difficult, the burnout is the percentage of nurses that just simply quit during the pandemic,
exactly.
or thereafter. It's a tough profession, and med techs too, and physicians and aides for sure.
Right down.
But to be able to tell these stories, because there's HIPAA,
Yeah.
And really, it's kind of a strange thing for a nurse, and I'm sure people share things with loved ones and near and dear, but at the end of the day, this is work that's done, and you can't really talk about it, not fully,
Right.
in a lot of ways. And
Right.
so that's one thing I really like about this, is that it really delves into the details.
Right.
Names are changed, of course, of patients. Some names are changed of your coworkers, not
Right.
but not all of them.
Right.
But to me, it's kind of, I'm sure it can be kind of cathartic to some people in this profession.
I think so. And I was fortunate too, because my span of years were basically 50 years. I mean, I started at St. Luke's as an orderly in 1971, and many of the stories in Ins and Outs of a Locked Ward are my orderly tales,
Hmm.
and then it's been 12 years since my retirement. So I've had a span of 50 years to tell these stories. So it's easy for me to avoid any concerns regarding HIPAA. Patients would probably not know who they are, but the big thing is many patients are going to be upset with me because they all wanted to be mentioned in the book by their name. And I told them I couldn't do it. I can't do it. Please, Henry, I cannot do it. Yeah, but don't you remember the time I disappeared right in front of you? No, but I still can't do it, and I used to get that all the time, still do. And so, but I think I did a fair job. And it's nice to have written. I think it's a different book entirely than most nursing books. Most tend to be like clinical or journals. And this is tongue in cheek with foxhole humor and the camaraderie that I had with both patients and staff. And back in my day, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we could take patients out. We're always taking them out to the ball games at Wacona Park, to the parades and picnics. And that's entirely different now, because the insurance companies say, if you can allow these folks to go out, they don't need to be in a locked setting.
I know
They could be in a
it.
step down or a daycare or something like this. But it was very important to take patients out, especially a day or two before discharge, because they needed to test the waters in a safe environment like Jones 3 in the courtyard. They felt okay. For one quick example, we had a patient that I took around. She was to be discharged the next day, and a fella just walked by, a pedestrian just walked by, and he had a Bum sweatshirt. Do you remember the name brand Bum?
Yeah.
BUM?
Mm-hmm.
She thought that he wore that purposefully because he knew that she hadn't a job and he was calling her a bum.
Yeah.
And she basically broke down.
Hmm.
I mean, so a very concrete thought, and it wouldn't have been recognized. And then, she stayed a little longer because she needed to, and she actually wanted to, because she wasn't ready to step back out.
Yeah. You really need that, because that ultimately we have to find a way to live in this, world,
right,
which can be not perfect, for sure.
I didn't mention that in my book, that I did have a last chapter about returning to work after I got hurt. And but I wanted to leave it on a good note, because a lot of it was still good. It was shortly thereafter that there was a ban on smoking. We'd allow patients 4 to 6 cigarettes a day in the courtyard, spread throughout the day, but we give them Nicorette gum and everything else that they needed. And we tried to wean them off smokes. But that was wrong too.
I mean, when you have these kinds of issues,
right?
Really, is smoking cessation the most important priority?
Well, exactly.
Let them have a smoke.
Exactly. And I was one of the few to fight it, despite the fact that it's totally against one's health. I mean, that's another reason why it was called Nurse-Lite, right? I used to buy community smokes.
I was going to say, you were one of those nurses that stopped at O'Connell's Convenience Plus or wherever, and picked up some cigarettes for the. And
I justify that by the medicines that we gave these folks, to make them drool and twitch for years, and cigarettes certainly are not harmless, but boy, you could turn. Plus, it brought a peace and a contentment to patients, and they look forward to that cigarette in the courtyard at 1 p.m. or 6 p.m. It was wrong there was no more joy in Mudville when that happened, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
Because there was so much fun and camaraderie. I mean, you have people that were strangers from different opposite poles, but gee, with the smoke, I never smoked, right? But people with the smoke in their hand, they'd be chatty and they'd be more peaceful. And well, it's gone. And maybe it's good that it's gone too, because now the price of cigarettes, they couldn't afford them anyways.
Hmm.
So all in all, it was a good thing. But during my time, it was, oh my God, they're here. You're suicidal. You're going into the emergency room to seek help. They find out that you can't smoke when you smoke a pack a day. You know, you're going to make a U-turn out the ER and you could do some harm to yourself. That was my bite. That was my bark. But I failed. You know, I lost, I think, probably 42-2 in the voting. Certainly a minority on that one, but
Doesn't
hey,
mean
it's
you
the
were
way I
wrong.
felt.
Doesn't
No,
mean
it
you're
doesn't
wrong.
mean not right, but I wasn't wrong.
I look at that, and you did mention something about the number of medications that
Mhm.
people are given and the dramatic impact. But it seems to me that we are much more quick to medicate in society and healthcare than we are to try to do the harder way, which
Right.
is sort of working through behaviors
Mhm.
by changing behavior, which is a
Right.
really, really hard thing to do. It's a lot easier to give someone a pill,
Right.
medicate them, maybe get them to become more calm, so
Mhm.
forth. But that's never been a real solution. And I
Yeah.
guess, not to get too deep into the American healthcare system, but if what we're trying to do is get people to become discharged sooner in a lot of
Right.
ways, and that's happening also.
Right.
Man, how are we really helping people ultimately get back into society the
Mhm.
way that they need to?
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's very tough. We've had, although fair play, medications have really helped many, many folks. In fact, Northampton State probably would still be open if it wasn't for Haldol and Thorazine, which were the early neuroleptics, antipsychotics. But they do get better, the medicines, but, you know, you just don't feel no patient wants to take your meds. I can tell you that right now. And I dished out a lot of medicines over my years,
Yeah.
but you look back on it and you question things, but hey, you do what you can, right? When you could.
Yeah. How did you meet Belita?
I met Belita in the hospital.
I know that.
Yeah.
Do you remember
Yeah.
the first time you saw her?
Oh yeah. She had a yellow ribbon in her hair. There were about 12 or 13 Filipina girls working in the lab. It was a big deal. Back in the early 70s, interns and residents came from all over the world, right? And so did med technologists. And many of them were from the Philippines. One or two would come and they'd tell these others. And so Belita's two sisters came before her. And that's how Belita eventually came to Pittsfield. And one of her sisters, Cheryl, was still there. Well, she was the prettiest of the lot, right? I wasn't dating anybody, and she had a yellow ribbon in her hair. And I said, I'm going to ask that woman there to marry me. And of course, the orderlies around me, what a gang, right? What a bunch. I love them all. In fact, I'll see a couple of them, I hope, on Sunday. Well, they said, "Oh, Harry, you're shopping at Macy's when you should be shopping at Zayre's." All right, so how's that for? Yeah, and anyways, asked her out. We had we got together pretty well, and there was martial law in her country. Otherwise, Belita and her sister would never have come to America. It was Ferdinand Marcus, martial law. Belita's father was an outspoken critic against him, writing letters to the editor and things like that, which was very chancy. And to safeguard his daughters, that's when Lynn, the oldest of the three, saw a little clipping in a medical journal come to the Berkshires, right? And she just liked the whole idea of there was a mountain scene, right? And so that's where
that is
Lynn,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
So there was literally an advertisement for the Berkshires in a
Yeah.
medical journal
Right.
in the Philippines.
in the Philippine Islands.
And that's how she decided
Yeah.
to come here specifically. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, it could have been
Yeah, with many others.
So whoever came up with that ad,
Yeah, yeah,
you gotta
yeah. Well, he brought me my bride.
send,
You know,
send a gift basket.
yeah, yeah. So it was nice.
Wow.
And I had just come back basically from Vietnam, so I was a little more accustomed to Asian culture and things, or more attracted, right? Whereas if I hadn't been in Vietnam and spent a number of days in Saigon and got to know many people, um, then I probably wouldn't have had the nerve to have asked her out because of our cultural differences.
Yeah.
But she was Catholic, I was Catholic, and sure, she loved my dad loved her, and everything. Well, I just want to tell you, she used to be an early bird. She used to have to draw blood early in the mornings in the wards, and I was the night orderly at the time. This is 6 a.m., right? And one time I saw her, and we're just not dating yet. I haven't asked her out yet. So I see her coming down the hallway with her little basket to draw blood in one room or the other. And at this one particular point, I had a bedpan in my hand, but at least it was empty, right? So I just had time to drape it over my forearm like this and carry it like a servant. And I walked by with my nose in the air. Well, of course, she got a charge out of it. And so that was breaking the ice and always opening the door for her at every single opportunity I had, right? So I endeared myself to her,
Yeah.
and you kind of wonder if it's fair or not. I mean, she's been away from home for a long time. And sadly, these last 2 years, she hasn't been back to the Philippines. But
Have you gone? You gone back with her?
oh yes, yeah, we had been going every 5 years. But her sisters eventually married and settled in San Diego. So there's where we go. So it's that go between again.
Yeah.
So we go
well, that's not bad.
No, it's not too bad at all. But she misses particular fruit, and things that you wouldn't think of, fruit, the ocean, people, even though for me it's very hot and humid there. But for her, it's very cold here, especially in the winters that are forever lasting,
And they seem to get longer.
Yeah, we have 2 good sons, so no regrets. Move forward, and we're both in pretty good health, so we're both in our.
And plus, you can hold court at Patrick's.
That's right. I go to the Patrick's, and we go to the Heritage House now in Lenox too. Because my brother and sister both live in Lenox. My younger brother and sister, so I kind of go back and forth. And now that John McNinch owns Patrick's Pub, Shana Powell was great. She was previous owner, and Micah, but I do like this John McNinch. I mean, I liked him.
A good guy.
Yeah, I liked him very much when he ran the Heritage, and he sold out, of course, and now he's running Patrick's.
And doesn't hurt that his last name is McNinch.
No, it does, of course not. No, surely doesn't.
Good family, really good family, good people.
Yeah,
good people. I knew his dad. He was a great man as well. So good stock there. But going through this process and then choosing to do this, and it's a labor of love, all these books are, but it is a lot different. Your past books kind of maybe more whimsical, or certainly a lot of joy, a lot of emotion. This one little different edge to it.
Yeah. Well, it needed to be truthful.
Sure, of course.
But fortunately, I put in great splashes of humor or lightheartedness in it, I hope. I think.
Yeah.
Because people say, a few people who have read it say they enjoy the humor. So it's a real nice balance, and you really need that, because some are cutting. I mean, as I say, some patients will wring your heart like a sponge. I mean, it's real sad. I mean, things just don't go their way, despite. And sometimes for no fault of their own, it's just, they just got the unlucky card, right through, unlucky, and that's the poor folks that you see sometimes tramping the streets. And I think the greatest concern or pain for people that are mentally ill is loneliness. They just can't seem, often, not all, just can't seem to fit in. I remember there was one kid, a good-looking guy, and ill, and I'd say, listen, let's go to La Casina. That was the place. Let's go to La Casina. I'll meet you there. And we'd go, but he just couldn't mix and you just felt bad for them. You'd say something a little off the wall to somebody, not your common hello and this and that. And you could see people just kind of shying away or backing off. And it wasn't fair for me to even have put him in that place, although I wanted to see if he could. And we've had many patients and stuff who do really well.
Yeah, because if they do and it works, then all of a sudden there's this new connection, a new form of confidence that would be there.
Yeah, it's very important. I used to take a few patients golfing as well and stuff. And that worked out much better because it was just a few people. But you get in a crowd with music and drink and all, it just wasn't a bad mix. And actually, I was told not to do it by our psychiatrist.
Yeah. Well,
but I wanted to try it. And it didn't work. Trying to assimilate them into a situation.
It was worth a shot.
It was worth a shot.
But it sounds to me like you didn't always go by the book.
No, well,
to state it.
No, that's why.
Obviously,
that's why I'm thinking that this won't be a book for nursing schools. It won't be a reference book. I think it's the exact opposite.
You mean BCC is not going to give it to the curriculum coordinator there?
Well, gee whiz, they might for saying this is.
They really should.
Yeah,
they really should because because there's an empathy standpoint, and that's another thing in healthcare. Like for a long time, and I think maybe this has eased up or changed a little bit in recent years, but for so long there's been this mentality where you need to have this sort of lack of empathy. The physician speaks with the family and gives them the bad news, and they can't show emotion or empathy, whether it's because of liability or something along those lines. But why?
Yeah, I know.
Why would that be the case?
Yeah, rather stoic oftentimes.
Yeah,
for no known reason. But I've seen some very positive things in my years. I mean, when I first started as an orderly and then as an RN, these physicians at the time, they were real tough. They were hard. I mean, I felt like an enlisted man with an officer, or I felt like a caddy with a golfer who was in a bad mood. They were very demanding, right? And they'd have you do things that they could have done. But now nurses and doctors have really gelled as colleagues. Now, after many, many years, the new crop of doctors in the last 20, 30 years are a different breed entirely than the ones that went in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
That's very good.
Good to hear.
Yeah, we have Dr. DeMarco, Bill DeMarco. He's the chief hospitalist there at BMC now. And he's got a cavalcade of wonderful people around him, physicians, and they're really bedwise. I mean, they're good. They're good in the room. They're good with families and patients and with nurses.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's great. But then again, there's always room for improvement, and it is a business. And when business gets in the way, like at St. Luke's and Pittsfield General, when I first started, they always hired handicapped people. All right. That I don't see as much of that anymore. They used to have handicapped people working in the laundry department, or collecting things, tidying up, or housekeeping, some jobs. But you don't see that as much now. It's, hey, we need people that's 100%. We got to get the work done. This
efficiency
kind of thing.
and productivity.
And St. Luke's had a real nice way about it. But it was the nuns. They were a whole different breed. The nuns. They were really, really good.
Yeah, I think I've seen that in healthcare also. There's a nursing facility here in the Berkshires called Mount Carmel Care, and it used to be under the Sisters of Providence, and now it's under the Carmelite, but in both cases, the sisters. And it is a different mentality. It's also just a different financial setup.
That's the thing.
And that's a big, you raise a great point, because if it's set up in a way where it's not made to maximize profit, then it is a different situation. And that's how healthcare should be. I mean, healthcare should not be a profit center.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. Now, you mentioned caddying. Now, were you a caddy at Pontuzic Country Club back in the day?
Of course not. I was a caddy at the Country Club of Pittsfield.
Oh, my. I didn't
just
realize
by chance.
that.
Just by chance. My brother's caddy, then I went after them to caddy.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
that
Because
was
my dad was at Pontuzic,
right.
and
Yeah.
Walt Kubica and
Right.
those
I
guys.
know Walter.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
amazing golfers.
Yeah.
Back in the
I
days.
was a member there for years
Yeah.
afterwards, but my caddying days were really good. And that's one thing that got me in a little bit in the soup when I first started as an orderly, because the boss, Ed Crosby, we turned out to be wonderful friends. He was a retired police officer, and he wasn't not in good health, but he did not like me. He did not like the length of my hair after I came home from Vietnam. He didn't think I had the mustard to cut the mustard and to do the job. Called me up on a couple of things in the early going, but he did not like the fact that I knew all the doctors because I caddied for them and they liked me and I liked them. So here I am chatting with Dr. Harrington. So, orderlies back then weren't chatting in the doctor's lounge, right, with some of these doctors that I had caddied for, Dr. Blaze and a few others, so that kind of rubbed him wrong, that it was a little too uppity for my position. Right.
Yeah.
So he almost gave me the axe, but there's two funny stories that I will not go into because we'll never leave this house tonight, but they're in the book. But I was really saved by a couple of events that happened on the second to the last day of my 2-week period, so
You'll
either way.
read about it in the book.
Yeah. Oh, it's fun. Well, I'll tell you real quick. We had one fellow we had one fella who always felt he was constipated. He was a big heavyset guy, and he'd call and we'd have to go up to his room and we'd have to roll him over, put the bedpan, it was a metal bedpan at the time, over, roll him back, draw the curtains, wait outside. He'd call you in a couple of minutes. He'd say, "Did I go, Joe?" Right? Roll down a curtain, pull them off. "No, you did not go, but you've gone twice already today," right? And we say, but nothing would do. So on the second to my last day of my probation, we put him on, and then John Quill, who I was with, was summoned elsewhere. So I'm waiting for this hopeful evacuation. And there's a dietary cart there because it was lunch. There was a baked potato right there on one of the plates, one big. So when he said, "Did I go, Joe?" and I pushed him over, I slipped the baked potato into the bedpan, whirled it over. I said, "Did you ever?" Rumble, 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 rumble. And then he said, "That's the nagging log I've been waiting on." And Ed Crosby, I thought I'd get canned for it, but Ed Crosby thought it was a brilliant placebo. Right.
That was brilliant.
Yeah.
And we're going to promote you.
Yeah, there I was. So I got through my 2-week probation and never looked back. But that was just uncanny that would have happened. And then what was worse, here I am on my last day, last rotation as a nurse. All right, student nurse. All right, at BCC. Tough. There were 12 guys in our course, which was fabulous, right?
Yeah.
3 of them got cut the first semester, but there were 9 of us left. They always tried to whittle it down to 40. You start at 60 students, end up with 40. BCC is a proud institution, much so. Back then, are you kidding? They had 100% passing rates for years on the nursing boards, and our scores were higher than many diploma and baccalaureate programs. All right. So they went, you had to really be fairly sharp to get in. So 60 would become 40. We were at 41 the last semester, 2 weeks left. This is no lie of a story. No lie of a story. We had one nursing instructor that I called the colonel, and she was a colonel, retired colonel in the Army. I dreaded her. She had flunked more students than all the others combined, the other 6 combined, right? And I had her for the very last rotation. And she called me up on a nursing care plan because I really...
You're the crosshairs, by the way.
Yeah, right. Believe me. Oh, don't worry. We'll get it down to 40. I just know who I'm going to get, right? So she said I didn't quite understand why we do what we do as a nurse, right? So it's a nursing care plan. I forgot the titles, this and that. So anyways, I had 2 of my best students put one together for me on this patient that I had, my last patient. So anyway, she took it from my hand, snapped it from my hand at 9 a.m. And she said, I'll be back at 2 with my answer. All right. Boy, are you kidding? So I'm with an elderly confused man, septicemia, nothing severe, up on isolation unit. And it was coming on 2 o'clock, and it's also time to take vitals. So I put the blood pressure cuff, on his arm, and thermometer and pitcher of water, and made sure he was looking as good as he could comfortably in bed. And as I was pulling the stethoscope after taking his blood pressure, she's at the door. All right. So she summons me over, and she's looking around the room, looking for one thing to dismiss me. And John, no word of lie, in my nervousness, I had plucked a rectal thermometer into his mouth rather than an oral. All right. So you have a red tipped rectal thermometer in this guy's gob. All right. When I should have had a blue tip. She never saw it. She never saw it. I was just about,
Somebody was looking out for you.
Yeah. I was just about to blow the whistle on myself, because maybe that would have been less of a crime rather than her telling me.
Right.
But I didn't. She turned around and she said, Kevin, your nursing care plan was excellent. I'll see you on graduation day. And she walked down. I tell you, in a flash, I had that right off of there, put the blue one in. And now, a couple of years after that, I was on the staff. I was an adjunct professor at BCC for 2 years during when somebody had to leave, a maternity leave. Oh, I loved the job. It was brilliant. And so we were coming back from a conference in Northampton, me and the colonel and a couple of the other nurses staff there. And I told her the story, right? She said, Kevin, that never happened. And I said, it did happen. And she said, well, if it did, I'm glad it did. So that was it. And we were great friends. And Ed Crosby and I became wonderful friends. In fact, he was the caterer for our wedding, Belita and I, when we had 300 people in attendance at my aunt's house in Lenox. And of course, you may know that both Belita and I were Norman Rockwell models, thanks to Belita.
No kidding.
That's in the book too. Yeah.
I missed that part. So, well, we can leave it for the book.
Yeah, it's for another time. Yeah.
We'll leave it for the book. But looking at that, so the writing, when did writing start for you?
I think it started when I was 20, when I was in Vietnam. My mom was anxious, nervous, had a case of the nerves, and I'd write 2-3 times a week. And there was very little to write about. And what you couldn't write about, a few things happened, but you wouldn't write about those. But I'd write about my hooch mates, the people in the bunkhouse. I was a firefighter, crash rescue firefighter. So I had many characters, and my parents got a charge out of my stupid little letters. All right. And I knew they came. And back then, I mean, today, now, when you're in Afghanistan or Iraq, I mean, people are doing FaceTime. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Yeah. I was able to call home once my entire year in Vietnam, and it was a Mars station, shortwave, once. So those letters were very important.
And so there's a spark in you, maybe in beginning to write those, and putting that together. And what did you love about it?
I liked writing about people and trying to be a little clever with a few words. All right, that's about it. Making somebody laugh, get a cheap chuckle, out of somebody else's expense, right? No, and that's why I like this book, because you can really color code a patient. I mean, you can really dress up a patient too, because they are, some of them, quite flamboyant, and there's a lot to write about. A little character. I mean, just anybody. There's a wealth to pick on, and not so much pick on, but to discover and to show, So it's a nice mix. I just hope I didn't go over the top with some of this trench humor, but that's what, but that's what
I guess you'll find out.
Yeah. I don't know. I admire NAMI, National Alliance of the Mentally Ill, and all the great work they do. But people have told me, Kevin, it's a wonderful balance. And without one, there wouldn't be the other side, So, well, we'll soon find out. My intention wasn't to do that, but my intention was to show really what a floor was like on a psych unit, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
mean,
in a hospital like here, and a
yeah.
wonderful hospital.
Yeah.
And we were, I mean, I can't say enough about BMC, and I think it's a tribute to the hospital when you look at it, and the people have read it. I mean, no, the hospital was, first class
Hmm.
when I was there.
And I think in a way, especially for local readers, it may demystify
Yeah,
Jones to some extent, because there is this feeling of mystery, or the
right,
vaunted
right,
Jones ward, or however it may be described. And of course, it's Jones 2 and 3
right.
and so forth. But people know when you say Jones
Mhm.
at BMC what they're talking about. So maybe this uh, opens doors a little bit, and opens people's eyes.
I hope so. People just know that every day struggles. Everybody has them. Everybody's human, and get on with it the best you can. And I love the fact how patients can persevere through so much, terrible stuff,
Hmm.
especially voices, some sorts of hallucinations. I mean, over all my years, people that are badgered by voices, they're not kind voices. They're not, hey, Joe, you look good today on the mirror. It's
Right.
never like that. Hey, look at you, you fool. I don't know why that is, why the voice is always antagonizing,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, strange.
What a career.
Yeah.
What a career.
So, but there I am years later. Whack nut myself. And oh boy. So there you have it.
You ever go back to the old neighborhood?
Oh, Wilson Street?
Yeah.
Very much. I take my walks there.
Do you?
Yeah, in fact, I found a quarter there not too long ago, and I imagine what it would be like if I had found a quarter when I was a kid, and how I'd run to disco store and all that I'd buy with 25 cents. It was a lot of money back in the 60s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in Wilson Park. That's another thing. And I like this Jim McGrath, who's currently
Sure.
trying to bring the parks back. Wilson Park was, I tell you what, it was our Six Flags. And basically all it was swing sets. You look at it now and it's like a postage stamp of greenery.
Yeah.
Compared to us. It was everything. We get up in the morning and we scoot down, and then you had these college students who were I forgot the term that they used for them, but they were always there to help you out and set up projects or habits, not habits, but hobbies. You had the great parades with the floats, and there was the queen and the king. And in fact, I came in second in a freckle contest once. I mean, and Johnny Riley beat me out, and it killed me, but he really beat me out because he had more freckles than I did.
Isn't that amazing? Like when you're a kid, something that now we see today, it's just kind of maybe like just a little tiny park with
Right.
some little swing sets, and
Yeah.
basically that's it. When you're a kid, it's larger than life.
Oh, it's fabulous, fabulous. We used to have the night movies, the big spools, and then we had softball teams, and there were, I think, 20 parks in the city. We go from Deming to Clapp, to Highland, every neighborhood had a park, and they were well maintained, and kids were good, Oh, now and again you'd have a punk, of course, but rarely, because they just wouldn't fit in. No, it was a time. And then the footbridge, which means a lot to me, and over to Housatonic near
Right.
Wilson Street.
Right. That goes from Waconia Street
Yeah, up to Lenox Ave.
to Lenox
Yeah,
Ave.
it was a shortcut into going to school at St. Charles,
Mhm.
where I went to school from Wilson Street to St. Charles. It would save about 5-7 minutes, but my mother forbade us to cross it because she was worried about water. And I think there was a bit of a droll there underneath for a while. Some guy who was a little chancy, I think.
Mm.
But I had never seen him or met him. But now it's in so disarray. It's condemned. It's fallen apart. The dam. So, and that whole little river there that ran below Wilson Street. So much trash. It's unbelievable. I'd be ashamed if I was running this city to see it in the state that it's currently in.
Mm.
I mean, for things that could easily be improved and beautified,
Yeah.
like cleaning up,
Yeah.
cleaning up.
Yeah.
There's
we do
none.
these the cleanups like in the west side and some areas. I think the Wilson Street area would be nice to do a little.
You look down Wacona Street there, where
Street.
that area is from Wilson Street to the footbridge. You've never seen anything like it. The trash, actually, from Mohawk Street, a little near Plain and Ronnie's Cycle.
Yeah,
down to the footbridge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we got to do better.
Well, that's it. I mean, but you remember, here it is now. That was 60 years ago. I'm talking. Now I'm an old crank. I've become a Mr. Wilson. I never thought. I hate barking dogs that are left out. I hate lawnmowers that roar. I hate leaf blowers more than anything on the planet. I don't understand them. I just get a rake. So I'm turning into a curmudgeon here as I go older.
That's okay. You've earned it.
Yeah, that's right. I can be a crank. Nobody likes a crank.
But it was quite a time to grow up, though. I mean, I look at that and you hear stories, and even when you look back into the deeper history, it never was the way we sort of romanticize it. But that generation actually did really have it well. Your generation during that time, in so many ways, it was like a kind of a magical time in the city, but especially for that neighborhood. I mean, like my dad grew up with you and my uncle Mel, and the rest, and they just like everybody, they'd go out and there's no parental supervision.
No, you didn't care. Nobody cared.
And it just and in a good way, because it's not. I suppose parents did care, but it was just the culture that it was like you just went out and
see you later.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, all the dogs ran free. I used to love to. You see a herd of dogs, like 10 or 12 of them all moseying around together. They'll never happen again. The poor things, they bark for one another. They want to sniff each other, right? And they can't. They're all isolated, their own little pocket. That's why a nice dog park would be nice too.
Yeah. So it's really cool. But now Sunday, and again, just because we know that this podcast is going to live on forever, but this is we're in late April, going into May of 2022, and you are going to have an event coming up for the book. So tell me about that a little bit.
Well, it's going to be at Patrick's Pub, where the first two took place, and well, you never know. But you're hoping for a crowd. COVID will put probably a damper on it, though it's loosening up. But some people are still hesitant of being a good crowd. We're expecting a crowd. Have a number of books. We have a wonderful band called the Housatonic Philharmonic with special guests, Tommy Powers on the mandolin, and Andy Gordon and Paul Rice and Tim, and that's going to be nice. And John McNinch is going to be the host, opening up on Sunday just for us. It's very kind of him. And who knows? I won't read, of course. It would be too much bedlam there that day to read, but I'll certainly thank everybody for coming, and I'll have books and gladly sign books, and just hope that everybody has a good time. But I do feel that many people will see many people they haven't seen for a very long time, and not just COVID. But in my circles over the years, I've been really fortunate for three things. Berkshire Community College, right? That was a kick. Boy, if I didn't have that, I'd never get through nursing school. With my grades, high school grades, nobody would even have looked at me. So I got there, and then I got to UMass on the GI Bill. That was fabulous. Berkshire Medical Center, that gave me basically 40 years. Or I say 30 because I broke up, but about 40 years of my life's work in a place where I could actually walk to work every morning, which is great. And then the Berkshire Eagle, which gave me the outlet to write these stories to begin with. So I call them the 3 Bs. And because of those 3 Bs, I know a lot of people, over the years. And I've kind of tried to endear myself in my stories. You can put, the nicest thing about writing is you can put your best foot forward. The best that you are, you put on paper. The worst that you are, nobody ever sees it, right?
Yeah, in the trash bag.
Yeah. So there you go. So people have liked my stories over there, like my Christmas tales and my St. Patrick's stories. And I meet a lot of people that I don't know who say that to me. So I think we'll have a fairly good crowd. But this has been nurtured for 40 years, this crowd. And I'm so delighted to stay in Pittsfield. My brothers, a few of them have moved away. They're in Boston and stuff. But it's so nice to meet people and your old friends and classmates. You bump into them. In Boston, they're all strangers until you kind of make new friends, you know? When a horn beeps when I'm taking my morning walks, I know it's probably somebody I know. When a horn beeps in Boston, they're telling you to get out of the way, right? So there's a great difference, and I'm delighted to have just stayed put. Same parish, St. Charles. Still hear the church bells that my father rang as a janitor there before he became a chauffeur for the nuns. So it all winds down very nicely to a nice tight ball.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Well, Kevin O'Hara, it's a great pleasure seeing you again. I think it's been a while since I had seen you, down the road, maybe before COVID, but
Right.
but I bumped into you, and of course saw that the book was out, and I wish you the very best on it. I know it's going to be a great success on Sunday. I can tell you that. I'm sure there's going to be a line out the door, like it was a decade ago for the last book. I bet that's going to happen, and so I wish you and Belita the very best, and the best to your family. It's just a pleasure seeing you again.
Well, thank you too, John. You've done an excellent job over the years yourself. So you're pretty stellar in your own way. So in fairness, here it was back in 2004, we were between microphones, and here we are once again.
Love it.
Yeah. So thank you.
One of my favorite places.
Yeah.
So.
The mic. Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank everybody.
Love it. Love it. Thank you.